The Hamilton Charity Gala was the kind of event that oozed old money from every corner, marble staircases that swept upward in perfect curves, gold-trimmed walls reflecting crystal chandelier light, and guests dressed in couture worth more than most people's yearly salary. Ava Monroe stepped out of her sleek, black limousine into the blinding flashes of photographers. Her gown, a long sheath of midnight silk embroidered with delicate silver threads, clung to her figure with understated elegance. She was there as the guest of honor, at least on paper, invited to finalize a monumental $5 billion partnership between her tech conglomerate Monroe Innovations and the Hamilton Empire, an old money dynasty whose roots stretch back to the Gilded Age. But as soon as Ava entered the ballroom, she felt it, a subtle tightening in the air, the stares that lingered just a second too long, the whispered conversations just beyond her hearing. Her eyes fell on the hosts themselves, Victoria Hamilton, poised like a porcelain figurine in a cream satin gown, and Richard Hamilton, towering and silver-haired, surrounded by a cluster of other influential guests. Determined to greet them with grace, Ava approached, hand extended. Victoria looked her up and down, one perfectly arched eyebrow lifting. Then she glanced at her diamond-encrusted watch, as if checking the time was more important than acknowledging her guest. "I wasn't aware we allowed diversity hires at the table," she said, her voice dripping with faux politeness, the emphasis on diversity slicing sharper than any blade. The group chuckled, not loud enough to draw stares from across the room, but enough for Ava to feel the weight of their ridicule. Her extended hand hung in the air for a beat before she calmly lowered it. She didn't flinch, didn't allow her face to betray a hint of the fire building inside. In moments like these, Ava had learned to take mental snapshots, filing away every insult, every smirk, every act of condescension. Not for revenge out of spite, but for the strategic, calculated kind that came later when the other person never saw it coming. The dining hall at the Hamilton Charity Gala was a study in opulence, mahogany-paneled walls lined with oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors, a ceiling mural depicting cherubs and golden clouds, and a table that seemed to stretch the length of a bowling alley, set with fine china and crystal that glimmered under the chandelier light. Ava Monroe sat midway down, her place card positioned between Richard Hamilton himself and a European shipping magnate she'd met once before at a conference in Geneva. The air was thick with the scent of truffle oil and slow-roasted meats, a far cry from the humble kitchen aromas of her childhood home where her parents, both public school teachers, had stretched every dollar but filled every meal with love. Richard leaned back in his chair, swirling a glass of Bordeaux older than Ava herself. "You must be proud," he began, his voice carrying the weight of someone used to speaking and being listened to. "Coming from humble beginnings, I imagine." His pause before humble was deliberate, an insult wrapped in velvet. A man across the table chuckled and added, "Bet you worked your way up from customer service or something like that." Ava smiled faintly, her eyes trained on the deep red in her wine glass rather than their smug faces. She had, in fact, graduated top of her class from Harvard, interned at one of the most competitive firms in Silicon Valley, and founded Monroe Innovations from her apartment while juggling 2 other jobs. She didn't correct them, didn't offer a counterstory to feed their need for a neat little narrative of rags to riches. That was the thing about people like the Hamiltons, they didn't actually want to know the truth. They wanted a story that made them feel superior, even when cloaked in feigned admiration. Halfway through the meal, as waiters replaced appetizer plates with main courses, Richard stood for a toast. To new partnerships, he declared, lifting his glass high, and to lifting others up to our table. There it was again, the patronizing tone, the insinuation that Ava had been brought up rather than fought her way to stand here on her own merit. Around her, the clink of crystal echoed, polite applause followed, and she raised her glass like everyone else, her face unreadable. But inside, she was already recalculating the cost of doing business with people who measured others not by their vision or achievements, but by how closely they resemble themselves. Ava had learned long ago that the most powerful counter to condescension wasn't to meet it head-on. It was to store it, let it sit, and unleash the answer when it could do the most damage. Tonight, she decided she'd finish her meal, endure their thinly veiled jabs, and smile like she was the perfect picture of compliance. But her mind was already working ahead, imagining what would happen if she took the very deal they so proudly dangled over her and made it vanish. The band had shifted to a slow, smoky jazz number, the kind of music meant to make conversations feel more intimate, more exclusive. Guests floated between tables, wine in hand, gossiping and exchanging air kisses, their laughter blending with the clink of glasses. Ava sat quietly, observing, the glint of her diamond earrings catching the light every time she turned her head. She was content to remain in the background for a few minutes to let the spotlight stay on the Hamiltons. That is, until Victoria Hamilton took the stage. The hostess, resplendent in her cream satin gown, took the microphone with the ease of someone who had been holding court her entire life. Before we begin the evening's raffle, Victoria began, scanning the crowd with a perfectly poised smile. I'd like to thank all of our guests, especially those who have traveled such long distances to be here. And for tonight's entertainment, she let her gaze fall on Ava, lingering just long enough for the surrounding crowd to follow her eyes. Perhaps our tech genius here can tell us how she managed to get past security. The words were delivered with a soft laugh, but they hit with the precision of a sniper shot. The ripple of chuckles through the crowd was low, but unmistakable. Polite enough to hide behind, cruel enough to sting. Ava felt dozens of eyes on her, scanning her gown, her skin, her very presence, as if to confirm she didn't belong. Her board member, seated 2 tables away, half rose from his chair, clearly ready to confront the insult head-on, but Ava caught his gaze and gave the smallest shake of her head. This wasn't the time. If she lashed out now, they'd paint her as emotional, unable to take a joke. No, she had something else in mind. She leaned back in her chair, lifting her champagne flute to her lips with an expression so serene it bordered on smug. She even joined the polite applause as the raffle began, pretending nothing had happened. Inwardly, though, every syllable of Victoria's insult was burned into her memory. Ava was no stranger to such tactics, humiliation disguised as banter, racism wrapped in silk. She had endured it in boardrooms, on panels, in interviews, each time walking away with a smile and an unshakable plan. That was her edge. She could take their best shot and still play the long game. And as Victoria read off the raffle winners, basking in the room's approval, Ava was already thinking of the one move she could make that would shatter their smug certainty, not just in private, but in a way the entire industry would feel. The beauty of playing chess instead of checkers, she thought, was that you never let your opponent see the winning move until it's too late. Tonight, Victoria thought she'd reduced her to a punchline. Soon, Ava would make sure the joke was on the Hamiltons, and it would cost them far more than their pride. The night after the gala, Amara sat in her penthouse suite overlooking the city skyline, the lights reflecting off the glass like diamonds scattered across the dark. The words from the Billionaire family still echoed in her mind, not because they hurt, but because they revealed something deeper. Arrogance so ingrained, they couldn't even recognize the hand that fed them. She was reviewing partnership documents when her assistant, Caleb, stepped in, visibly tense. "You're going to want to see this," he said, placing a tablet on her desk. It was a leaked video from a gala. The moment the family mocked her, caught in crisp detail, their smirks, their condescending tone, and the awkward silence that followed. Social media had already seized it, hashtags exploding across platforms. Comments ranged from outrage to disbelief, with journalists beginning to question whether the family's empire was as untouchable as it appeared. Amara knew then that this wasn't just about her pride, it was about setting a precedent. Too often, powerful people got away with disrespect simply because of their wealth. She decided not to lash out impulsively, but to strike in a way that would echo for decades. Pulling out her phone, she called her legal team. "I want every clause in that contract reviewed," she ordered, "especially the ones that allow for immediate withdrawal based on reputation risk." Caleb's eyes widened. He knew what this meant. Amara wasn't just going to pull out. She was going to make it airtight, unchallengeable in court. Meanwhile, The billionaire family was oblivious. They were laughing about the night over breakfast, congratulating themselves for keeping her in her place, still unaware of the storm they'd triggered. Their PR manager had yet to brief them about the viral video, but that was about to change. Within hours, calls from investors began pouring in, some expressing concern, others outright threatening to back out unless they publicly apologized. The father, Harold Whitmore, dismissed it at first, calling it internet nonsense, but as the media headlines multiplied, a flicker of worry crept into his voice. Back at Amara's suite, her team was already drafting a press release, not an attack, but a statement of fact. She would no longer be pursuing the $5 billion partnership due to irreconcilable differences in corporate values. The beauty of it was in its professionalism. No insults, no accusations, just a quiet severing of ties that would leave the public to connect the dots themselves. She knew this would cut deeper than any public spat. It would hit their reputation, their bottom line, and their pride all at once. And as the ink dried on her decision, Amara allowed herself a small smile. The mask had slipped, both theirs and hers. Hers revealed a steel spine. Theirs revealed fragility behind the facade of power. The aftermath of Maya's announcement was like a nuclear blast in the world of high society and big business. The gala, once buzzing with champagne chatter and polite applause, now sat under a suffocating silence. The white billionaire family, Henry, Margaret, and their smirking son Preston, looked as if someone had ripped the floor from beneath their designer shoes. Whispers rippled through the ballroom as high-powered executives and international dignitaries began to put the pieces together. Maya Reynolds, the woman they had so casually mocked moments earlier, had been the linchpin in a $5 billion partnership that would have cemented the family's dominance in global luxury markets. And now, with one calm, deliberate move, she had severed it entirely. Henry tried to save face, stepping forward with an oily smile, extending his hand as though the insults had been nothing more than a misunderstanding. Maya, let's not be hasty. Business is business, after all. We can, but Maya didn't let him finish. She raised a hand with effortless authority, her diamond bracelet catching the chandelier's light. No, Henry. Respect is the foundation of any partnership. You made it clear tonight that you don't value me as an equal, and I refuse to work with anyone who believes my skin color makes me lesser. Her voice carried across the room, each word slicing through the air like a well-aimed blade. In that moment, the tables turned completely. Investors began whispering, not about Maya's outburst, but about the billionaire family's arrogance. Reporters who had been lounging at the edges of the room now rushed forward, cameras clicking as they captured every second. Social media lit up in real time, with hashtags like hashtag Maya Reynolds and hashtag Respect in Business trending within minutes. Guests who had avoided speaking to her earlier suddenly scrambled to shake her hand, offer condolences, or, more transparently, align themselves with her rising public influence. Margaret's face was tight, with fury, her glass of champagne trembling in her grip. Preston, ever the smug heir, muttered something under his breath, but Maya caught it. You'll regret this. She turned to him with the kind of slow, cold smile that could freeze a man in his tracks. The only thing I regret, she said softly enough for Justin to hear, is wasting my time with people who think they can buy class when they've never had it. Leaving them in stunned silence, Maya walked out, her emerald gown flowing behind her like a banner of victory. Her phone was already buzzing with offers from other global firms who wanted to work with her on her own terms. The billionaire family's humiliation was complete. The deal they had spent years negotiating was gone, their reputation was in tatters, and all of it was self-inflicted. Maya didn't just win that night, she redefined the rules of the game. The following morning, Serena sat in her penthouse office, sunlight streaming across her polished mahogany desk. She had barely slept, her mind consumed by the way the gala had unfolded. The insults still echoed in her head, not because she cared about the opinion of the Whiteworth family, but because of the precedent it set. If she allowed this to slide, they would think they could speak to any black woman in business this way. Across from her, her CFO, a sharp woman named Dana, flipped through financial briefs. They're expecting your signature on the partnership papers today, Dana said. Serena leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing slightly. Oh, they'll get an answer today, just not the one they expect. Her voice was calm, but beneath the calmness was the precision of a strategist who knew she held all the cards. The Whiteworths weren't just wealthy, they were desperate. Their company, Whitestone Enterprises, was quietly bleeding cash from a failed expansion in Southeast Asia. Serena's $5 billion injection wasn't just a boost, it was a lifeline. Without it, their credit lines would collapse in weeks. Dana hesitated. If you pull out now, it'll make the news by morning. Serena smirked. Exactly. They wanted to make me the subject of gossip last night. I'll return the favor. She instructed her legal team to draft a formal withdrawal letter, citing irreconcilable differences in corporate values. But she didn't stop there. She arranged for her PR department to release a carefully worded statement about partners whose internal culture fails to respect diversity and professional dignity. The statement didn't name the Whiteworths outright, but it might as well have been a spotlight over their mansion. By midday, Serena had meetings lined up with two of Whitestone's top competitors, each eager to secure her capital. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about redirecting her resources to people who valued respect. And yet, deep down, Serena knew she wasn't done. She had more than the power to pull funding, she had evidence. An overheard conversation from the gala, caught accidentally by a nearby photographer's mic, included the Whiteworth patriarch making a shockingly crude remark about keeping her kind in their place. That clip, Serena thought, was going to be her final checkmate. The Whiteworths didn't even have 24 hours to react before the story detonated. Serena's public statement had already sparked speculation, but when the leaked audio hit social media, the reaction was nuclear. News outlets picked it up within hours with headlines like Whiteworth Empire in turmoil over racist remarks. Serena hadn't needed to release it herself. A well-placed journalist she knew had taken care of that. Now, videos of the Whiteworths' lavish lifestyle were being spliced with captions about their hypocrisy, and hashtags like hashtag respect is priceless and hashtag partnership canceled trended worldwide. That morning, Whitestone's stock plummeted by 37% before trading was halted. Banks froze their credit extensions, sensing the instability. And in perhaps the most poetic twist, several of their board members resigned, citing ethical conflicts. Serena watched the chaos unfold from the balcony of her office, sipping a glass of champagne. Dana approached, holding her tablet. Their PR team just called, asking if you'd consider salvaging the deal. Serena didn't even glance at her. Tell them respect isn't something you can buy back. By the afternoon, Serena's own company's name was everywhere. Not as the aggressor, but as the standard bearer for corporate dignity. She received messages from young Black entrepreneurs thanking her for showing that money should never force you to tolerate disrespect. In the evening, she attended another gala, this one hosted by one of Whitestone's rivals, who welcomed her like royalty. The difference was night and day. As the room applauded her entrance, Serena realized she hadn't just walked away from a $5 billion deal. She had taken control of the narrative and proven that power is meaningless without integrity. The Whiteworths, now shunned by their peers, were left scrambling to survive. Serena didn't need to watch them fall further, she'd already won. And in the world of high-stakes business, that kind of victory was worth far more than any contract.